Welcome to Sticky, Stories That Stick. Join me, Amelia Forzak, as I sit down with master storytellers to explore what makes some narratives unforgettable. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Amelia Forzak, host of Sticky, Stories That Stick, where I sit down with successful executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders to uncover the pivotal moments that shape them and explore what transforms personal experiences into stories that truly stick with audiences. Whether you're crafting your next keynote, writing a book, or simply want to connect more authentically with others, you'll discover the psychology behind memorable storytelling and learn how to turn your own life experiences into narratives that resonate and inspire action. Today, I have a very exciting guest with us, but first, I just have to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Pithy Wordsmithery, a Chicago-based boutique firm founded by yours truly. I'm a New York Times bestselling ghostwriter, and I love helping people write and publish their books. My team and I have helped authors turn their stories into bestsellers and their brands into thought leadership platforms. Our readership is in the hundreds of thousands, so even if you haven't heard of us, there's a decent chance you've read something we've written. If you've ever thought about writing a book, check us out online at pithywordsmithery.com. Today, I have Roger Scholl with me. Roger was a vice president and executive editor at Penguin Random House, in the Crown, Doubleday, and Random House imprint for almost 40 years. Over the course of his career, he's worked on over 60 New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestsellers, and he's worked with authors such as Chip and Dan Heath, Eric Ries, Marshall Goldsmith, Arianna Huffington, theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, historian H.W. Brands, and dozens of others. He's been working as a senior executive at Kevin Anderson for the past 2 years, as well as writing and editing on a freelance basis. Roger, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Amelia, it's a pleasure to be on the show.
For all of you listening, Roger is an OG in the industry. He is the person that I email when I'm trying to figure out if an aspiring author has a shot at getting a book deal, because he has been in the industry for so long. He knows what publishers are looking for, and he's worked with so many master storytellers to help them bring their stories to life. Roger, I am super honored to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on. I'm really thrilled.
So you've seen hundreds of manuscripts and book proposals over the years. Tell me, what makes some stand out over others?
It's a great question, and it's a little hard to answer. Obviously, we read a lot, and as you go on in book publishing, you develop a specialty. You get to know a certain area particularly well. Agents get to know you for a certain kind of book. You can always stretch those limits, but it's a helpful thing if you become sort of a magnet in house for certain kind of certain kind of book, certain kind of fiction. I did all nonfiction, and I was the editorial director of the business list. Then became vice president and executive editor, and sort of ran that list. I got to know a lot in the business category, particularly. And all the subcategories in business, thought leadership and practical books and books on career and so forth. And eventually you start to recognize what distinguishes successful books from books that, aren't as strong. And you can often tell pretty quickly when you get a proposal in. So most projects come in from agents, at a big house like Penguin Random House. It's the biggest trade house in the world. Um, Most projects, 95% come in from agents, so they're represented. And sometimes you've gotten a call in advance, or you've talked about the book over lunch, or you get an email about it. There's been some communication, but not always. And then you start reading, and you're juggling a lot of things. You might not read it till that night or on the train going home. If it's very long, maybe you get to it over the weekend if you have a little time. Um, but you getting a sense first of the idea, the writing, the strength of the writing, the platform of the author. Is this a former author who's published other books and has a track record that you can look at? Sales track record. Do they have a big podcast? Do they have, what sort of platform do they have to announce their book and reach out to the public and encourage them to check out the book at the bookstores? Um, the freshness of the idea matters. This is where a lot of experience comes in. Knowing what's been published, knowing what's worked, having read those books, being aware of what other houses signed up. They may still be in the process. They haven't been published yet, but you know what is under contract to a certain degree. All of that helps in deciding, is this a fresh idea? Are there 3 other books out there in this? Um, so that matters a lot. And then, as I say, the strength of the writing, the storytelling quality is really important. Most nonfiction books, there's a list of ideas that you could probably pull out and put on a postcard. What matters is marrying those ideas with, compelling stories, that, in the words of, say, Chip and Dan Heath, remain, are sort of sticky, that stay with you, that are memorable, that you can use. And so all of those factors come into play as you assess a project.
Yeah. Great answer. There are so many things that affect whether or not a publishing house is interested. When I talk with authors, it's always hard to kind of go over that full gamut. Like, it's what the idea is, it's how good you can tell the story, and then like what the platform is. So the idea part is also kind of storytelling, right? Because it's the way, like, what lens you put the idea through. Like, do you ever get book proposals or like query letters or that kind of thing where you see the idea starting to form and then you realize the storytelling needs to get stronger? Like, how do you sort of shape the idea?
You know, we get so much in at the bigger houses. You're getting a lot of projects in every week. I don't know the exact number, but 15 or 20 proposals probably. You're talking to people all the time. You're in meetings all the time. You're editing all the time. Um, it's just, there's not so much time to develop a project.
Yeah.
So there is, however, certainly you're editing and shaping the books that you sign. So you're responsible for those. And certainly that was always true for me. I was very hands-on, and closely involved with the structure and the stories and individual sentences, paragraphs, chapters. We worked on that back and forth quite a bit. If it's not well written, most of the time it's going to be a pass, unless if it's a best-selling author, if it's an author with a sizable platform. I don't know, they have 1 million followers on YouTube or TikTok or something like that, or they have a huge podcast, or they're famous in their field. Let's say it's a CEO of a company, someone who knows a lot, and maybe they're somewhat known, maybe not household names, but not Robert Iger at Disney, but maybe a level down. But there's good information. And, it's interesting. That there hasn't been a book that's touched on some of these ideas. What you could do at that point, given the platform of the author, is go back to the agent and say, "Look, I think this person is terrific. I don't think the proposal is there," and just give the agent some feedback. It says, if this were revised, if he or she teamed up with someone who could bring this to fruition a little better in the proposal stage, I'd love to look at it again. There's definitely something here. Um, it's also true that a lot of projects, even those that come in from agents, are not perfectly formed. You have concerns, or maybe you see that there's something there to work with, something interesting, and the author is a authority in his or her field. Um, but it's the approach is off. It needs to be turned, like 90 degrees or so. We need to let's focus on something else. instead, or there are some ideas I'd love to turn it and not focus on sales, but talk about communication or strategy or something like that. Usually a little more interesting than that. But so you can, it's an opportunity. I see that as an opportunity, actually. If the proposal isn't perfect, um, maybe it's not a project that every house in town is going to be interested in. Usually projects come in, they're multiply submitted. Occasionally you get an exclusive, but mostly not. So others are reading it at the same time in other houses, and you're competing in the marketplace for books that you want to acquire. And if it's fabulous, I can guarantee you everybody wants it, or almost everybody wants it. You don't see that often, a project where everything comes together in a terrific way. There was one, for example, I got in at some point, The Power of Habit, which became an enormous, huge best-selling book. The proposal was just terrific. Everything about it just screamed, this is a very commercial book. This is going to sell really well. And we made an offer right away. Everybody else was making offers, and you're competing. We didn't get the book in the end. But when it's imperfect, maybe everyone isn't screaming and clamoring for it. And maybe you have a little more opportunity. You can bring your own thoughts and creativity to it and shape it and be involved in the and influence, the direction of the book. And maybe you have a little edge then in terms of signing it up. If you do that, if you're successful at sort of turning it, the author's on board, the agent's on board. So to that extent, you can shape ideas. But there are plenty of projects. It's really like more than 90% of the projects that come in from agents are just no's for any number of reasons. We won't go into an analysis. We're not, in the business of critiquing it or anything. We simply say, no, we'll have some reason. We'll offer up some reason, but we're not going to, go into a lot of depth. And you never know exactly what's going on in-house. It could be that we published a book along those lines a couple of years ago and it bombed. It just didn't work. So the odds of getting another book on this subject through the acquisitions process is pretty low. I'll probably say something like that.
Yeah.
And a book that I deeply regress, from agented by a friend of mine, Steve Ross. It was a negotiation book. Now, I had done a big negotiation book that I bought from William Morris Endeavor, and a terrific guy who taught down at Wharton, Stuart Diamond, and really a terrific book. But we paid quite a bit for it. It was moving along. It was successful. And my friend Steve was representing another project on negotiation. And it's like, how many negotiation books can you publish on your list? If enough time has gone by, sure. But I just didn't feel like we could take on another one. It was too close. It was too close on the heels of that. So I didn't participate. I bowed out. The book went to auction. It was bought by Hollis Heimbach at HarperCollins. And it went for enough money that there was a terrific ghostwriter who I'd worked with on a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi that did really well, 1 million copies. Anyway, he was going to write this book now because there was enough money to make it happen. He had actually bowed out for a time because the advance wasn't going to be high enough. Well, now he had enough, and it became a monster. It was just over the weekend. I was just looking at a post from Steve. It's now up at over 5 million copies in all editions. It's called Never Split the Difference by former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss. And
I've read that.
a category killer, just what we call a category killer. So there's, and that's always the danger. If you've got something, maybe you can't take on another book. Maybe you pass for perfectly valid reasons for your imprint or your house, but that doesn't say anything about the quality of the proposal or how well it'll sell. Good example.
That's a great example, right? So it's a good fit for someone, but it's not going to be a good fit for everyone. And that doesn't have anything to do with the quality of that book. It's other
Yeah,
factors that are going on. So
exactly.
that makes sense. So you brought up ghostwriters, and that's interesting. Where do ghostwriters fit in this whole thing, this whole like system of storytelling? Because you're working with the thought leader, the idea person, and
Yeah.
some of those people are probably better communicators than others, better writers than others. Not all are professional writers. So how does the ghostwriter fit into that with making the storytelling really shine?
It's interesting. I mean, in-house, the projects come in usually already with a proposal. A ghostwriter has been attached. It's maybe someone in the agent stable, or maybe it's a writer, with another agent. There's a co-agenting. So by the time I get it, there's already a ghostwriter attached. But the fact is, as you point out, CEOs, they're not professional writers. Almost none of them are. Politicians, I mean, there are plenty of people, celebrities, Hollywood, folks, they're not writers. Occasionally, yeah, someone writes their own book and they're really good at it. Look at Barack Obama. He wrote all of his books. Phenomenal writer, but it's pretty rare. So they need a ghostwriter, someone that can bring their words to fruition. And it's a very close relationship. The author is intimately involved in every step. They're reviewing everything, so on and so forth. So it's not like they aren't front and center. They are, but in terms of actually crafting, the story or the chapters, the prose, they need professional help sort of elevate it and take it to the next level. At Kevin Anderson, that is what we do. We do a lot of we have a huge list of ghostwriters, and when we have an author who wants to write a book, we help to pair them with a ghostwriter. We give them a number of candidates that we think will fit, where the chemistry we believe will work, where they have a lot of strength in a certain category, and they choose, the ghostwriter, and then we work with them closely in developing the book and the book proposal that goes out to agents. And so, yeah, we're now involved in the process of making that proposal, creating that manuscript, guiding that process. And the first thing we would do is we set up a series of strategy sessions to talk through exactly what the author wants to accomplish and figure out the right approach and come up with an outline or come out of that session, those series of strategy sessions with a sort of roadmap or an outline of the book that they can follow.
Yeah. And full disclosure, this is actually how Roger and I met. I'm a ghostwriter for KA, and so we're partnering on a project together, and working with Roger has actually been amazing because I don't usually have an editor over me when I'm working with an author, and Roger's given me such good feedback. Like I have totally appreciated that, like throughout the process. I feel like you've given such good guidance on like, have you thought about this? Or here are the things that are really unique about this book, or like here's what to bring out with the author. And I think that like I can tell that you've had just like a ton of experience with other books and knowing what else is out there. Um but it definitely has been a journey from the beginning, figuring out like, how do we position the book? What are the stories that are really different? What's going to really resonate with an audience? And like, what is this author's niche? Because obviously the author is like very successful, good at a lot of things, but what is like the story that we're telling?
Yeah, yeah. And what differentiates this book from lots of other books in the category? What makes it special?
Hmm.
And that's something we want to convey to the reader.
Yeah. So how do you feel like when you've worked with authors over the years, do you feel like first time authors have trouble sharing some personal stories, or some of the like the more like humbling moments, or the things that are like a little bit more juicy or interesting for readers? How do you kind of like bring that out of people, or at least tell them that they should work on that?
Yeah, yeah. You know, in terms of projects that are submitted to us at Penguin Random House, the bar is so high that if it's not already reflected in the proposal, unless again the author is special in some way in terms of the platform and so on, it's probably going to be a pass. It's the fact is the bar is really high, but that's part of the role of an agent too. Is they're taking on a project because they believe they can sell it. They're not getting paid unless they sell it. So they work with their authors too, and making sure that it delivers on all the ways that a book in that category needs to deliver. And there's always, with nonfiction, there's still a deeply personal story that needs to be told. Who are you? What's your background? What's your moral compass, or what are your values? What are the stories that you can tell that sort of describe, these values or the takeaway that you want to focus on? So that personal story is always important. And I think readers want to learn about and trust, the author, because the author is their guide through this subject. And for me as an editor, I want to learn. I want to come away with an education myself, because I'm going to learn. I'm signing up books that maybe I only know a little bit about. String theory. What I can contribute is, I'm a general reader who needs to understand these concepts in a non-mathematical way, so I can be helpful when it becomes too dense, or when it's not clear, what this theory means or what the consequences of it are. So anyway, we can play an important role that way.
Yeah.
The when the stories occasionally, well, I'll give you an example, a famous example. There's a terrific, probably the one of maybe the best ghostwriter today is J.R. Mullinger. And he did his own book called The Tender Bar, but he was teamed up with Andre Agassi to write Agassi's memoir on tennis. It's called, I think it's just called Open. Well,
Love it.
it's such an amazing book, such an amazing book.
Yeah.
And, I think a good deal of what Mullinger did was to find ways to help Agassi open up and talk about things maybe he wasn't prepared to talk about, or even psychological, struggles that he'd gone through that he had just buried. He didn't realize, how much of an impact they had on him and on his play and so forth. So a lot, the book we have is amazing, and Andre goes so deeply into his life and his career, his feelings about tennis, his feelings about lots of things. And I think that was a key contribution on the part of Mullinger. He got Andre Agassi over the period of a couple of years to open up, talk. He would write, share. They go back and forth to drafts and so forth. But getting him to delve a lot more deeply into what he did and why he did it. He has an astounding memory. He can remember matches from, an individual points from, 20 years ago. But, sort of thinking deeply about, his own psychology, or why his feelings, or why he did certain things, that's harder.
Yeah. There is an incredible amount of detail in that book. And when I was reading it, I was thinking, like, how much of this did they both have to go back and look up, like, who won which match? It's still interesting, even though it goes over like a million matches, and like
Yep.
what he was thinking and what happened in each play and all that. And yeah, it's incredible how much information actually is in that book. I'm curious about how that whole writing process went, because I know that Andre like sought out JR, right? He like had read that book and was like, this is the person I want to tell my story.
Very smart of him.
Yeah. And JR also wrote Prince Harry's book too.
Yes, Prince Harry's and Phil Knight's book as well.
Yeah. So he's like
Shudong.
epic ghostwriter. And so so much of that is just making the person comfortable, and that takes a while, right? So if you're really trying to get in their head and get their stories, like I personally find that when I'm working with authors, a lot of times like they don't even know what the story is from the beginning, like what the most important things are. Yeah, so it's like after a lot of like reflection and digging deeper, we find more details. And so for those really important books, I can see how you'd want to dedicate like a few years to get through all of that.
And
Um,
even with, someone who's CEO of, I don't know, a startup in Silicon Valley, you still want to know more. You want to get under the surface. And a lot of people just don't live there. And, one of the challenges, one of the ghostwriter is to help them get below the surface and remember those stories and see the connection between why they did what they did when they were growing up versus how they treat people today in
yeah.
their course. It's, it's really helpful.
Writing a book, I think, for people, it turns into a therapeutic experience where
Mm.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a, they feel like a different person at the end of it. Like you process so much and put in the work. And so, yeah, I feel like that's so interesting.
And it's so much work. I mean, in addition to writing the book, I mean, that's your job is only half over. Now you need to go out and introduce the book to audiences and talk about it and do
Mhm.
media and find ways to sort of help readers discover the book,
Right,
which is increasingly hard, when a lot of stores like Amazon are online, and it's not so easy just to wander the aisles and
right.
look for something new.
Yeah. A lot of it is online or direct promotions from the author. Um, I want to go back to something you were saying about like the memoir. So talking about memoir versus business.
Yeah.
Sometimes when talking to aspiring authors, they say like, "Well, I want it to be a combination of memoir and business book," or they aren't sure which is more appropriate for their idea, or they don't. They kind of want. They're like, "I want it to be a cross of these genres," and if they're a business leader and they want to teach people how to do something, I always would recommend the business route over memoir. But I think sometimes people don't realize that they're going to have their personal stories in the book either way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first question, that editors in-house ask themselves, and everybody in-house asks, is who's the audience for this book? Who are you trying to reach? Um, so if it's a book of politics or say a Hollywood, celebrity story, it's really entertainment in a way. You're going to have your followers from your side of the aisle if it's politics. If you're a celebrity share, if you're um, we published green lights at Crown just as I was leaving. Came out actually just after I left. We signed them up, which has done phenomenally well. Matthew McConaughey's book. It's entertainment. Yeah, there are takeaways that you can embrace. They can change your life, but you're mostly reading because you care about that person, and you're entertained by the stories, and you're going to talk about some of those stories to your friends over drinks or dinner or on social media, and so that's one kind of book. Um, Often in other categories, let's say business. I mean, occasionally a business book is an entertainment, but usually even a business memoir is more about sort of insights, lessons learned. I mean, I think for Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, um, just how incredibly hard it is to start a company and make it a success over a period of 20 years. I think it was 20 years. Where you're dancing on the edge of a knife. You're constantly about to go bankrupt. It's so hard, and seeing just how hard it is, how much you have to sacrifice is incredibly insightful. If you're thinking about starting up a company, so what a great journey about one of the foremost business icons in history. Uh, so, even those kinds of memoirs, I think there's a lot of takeaway. I remember we had bid for a book called Creativity Inc. Um, and it is by the guy who headed up. I think he's still there. Um, Pixar.
Hmm.
And it was before the merger with Disney. I think it was started up by Steve Jobs had helped to start it up, and it was a stockholder. But it's an incredible story. Lots of insights about how to the whole creative process. How they go about making animated films. But you also have a company that made all these amazing movies that were, the hottest things going in the 90s and 2000s. And so there's just an inherent fascination because we all know Pixar movies, we all have heard of Pixar, and we're just incredibly interested. And so you've got stories to tell, but genuine takeaways about the process of creating something like this and the constraints. And so it sort of delivers on both fronts.
Do you think those are the best books where it's entertaining and you learn something?
It just depends. I mean, I read biographies. I read Grant. It took me, I think, 3 centuries to read it. It was so long. It was 1,000 pages, but it was so good. It was so rewarding to read. There was so much went into the writing and researching of that book. And I learned a lot about, the Civil War, certainly, but about Grant himself and what made him, such an outstanding general at a time when the Union Army was just going through generals constantly, that no one could, was very successful on the field of battle. And why Grant was. So it was just eye opening. So it just depends on the book. It depends on the category. Um, the other thing that I think is true is that we tend to publish sometimes, in trends. So, there were, in terms of nonfiction, there were a lot of adventure books that did really well in the 90s, Running the Amazon and Into Thin Air and Into the Wild and so on. Um, in the 2000s, in the business category space, particularly behavioral economics became a big deal, translating some of these new ideas about how we think and why we think with the way we do into books that sort of describe how we can improve ourselves, improve our lives. I think about why we behave the way we do. You dominated a lot of bestseller lists. So we think that way too. And sometimes those trends eventually sort of play out. And we need to look for new trends. So.
Yeah. Do you see any trends coming down the pike?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think probably the biggest is AI and what that means and the impact it's going to have on everything. I think that's a huge trend. Um, and given all of the change, the partisanship, and so forth in politics, a lot of books around the fringes that deal with the nature of that change and how to respond to it. What does it mean? Where are we going? So that's certainly true. So not in the business category there, but AI books certainly would fall in the business category. And I did
Yeah.
some work on a few of those.
One thing that seems like a challenge is like trends can come on so quickly,
Yeah.
and then like, you want the book like right now, and
Yeah.
publishing is like notoriously slow, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, it is. 90% of the time. I mean, you're publishing thousands of books. Penguin Random House publishes a couple thousand books, maybe more. And maybe there's 10,000 general interest books a year published. So you've got to have schedules. You need to put books in slots. There are reasons, I guess, for why it takes mostly 9 months to publish a book. They have to do with the way we produce and sell books into the accounts. But can we publish, as we did, I think, Barack Obama's book in 1 month? Yeah, we can. Um, it involves an enormous amount of work. It's an enormous amount of expense. But if the book, if it's important enough, as a financial investment to do that, we're going to do it. And so all the rules go out the window. You need to hand ship by Federal Express, every book. It's a really expensive process, but yeah, can it be done? Yeah, it can. So when there's a big book that's tied to an event, those schedules get truncated. They have to for those books, otherwise you miss the moment. And there's no point in publishing if you can't put them out quickly. But those are special books, and they need to be big
That's
enough.
Obama. If you're not
Yeah,
Obama,
yeah.
it might take longer than a month.
It's normally it's like 9 months, I think, from the time it's accepted by the editor to the time it's actually in the stores on sale. That's
Yeah.
roughly true. But it can be, you can slice off a month or two for reasons. It's all, that's not stretching it too much. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little longer, but usually not. Um, yeah.
I help people self-publish. That's what we do at Pithy Wordsmithery. Our standard timeline for self-publishing is 4 months.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, we can have it go faster. We've done like 2.5, 3 months if the author's
Yeah.
super responsive with looking at the edits and the proofing and all that. But there are so many steps. A lot of times people don't realize like what really goes into making a book perfect, and having to go through and look at every comma, like look at all of the, like, does it follow, if you're doing Chicago manual style, like check all that, check the proofing, the images, like once it goes
Yeah.
into layout, new errors are introduced, like, and it just, the, like, getting it done in a month makes me feel like people
Oh,
would have to be up literally every night, all night, or if
no, you
not,
have teams of people working. At that point, you have teams of people working on it. So you don't have one copy editor, you have
right,
7 copy editors, and everything is different. The whole process is different.
like second
Um,
shift, third shift, like,
it's it's crazy, but you're right. There's so much, because you've got to go through copy editing, and then typesetting. You've got design. You've got proofreading of the galleys. You got
mhm,
first pass, second pass, third pass. Usually, you'll try to go through a bunch of passes to catch all those things. And as each section is added, the indexing isn't done until after second pass, because the pagination could change. But all those things are collapsed if they need to be in house. Yeah.
yeah. So, what else haven't I asked you? I feel like you're such like a wealth of information.
Well, I mean, happy to be back at any point if I can address more. It's a fun industry. Um, it's hard. It's hard to get your book taken on by an agent. It's hard to get your book published by a publisher. On the other hand, the fact is publishers only exist and agents only exist to find new projects. And some of the biggest books we can think of are by authors who's never published before. It's their first book, and it's taken off. And yes, their second book, third book, all right, now they're a best-selling author, granted. But at some point, Malcolm Gladwell wasn't. He was a writer, and they started writing for the New Yorker. That's great, but Michael Lewis, his first book worked, but Liar's Poker. But uh, you know, with that publication of that first book, he's like every other first author. He's got to find a way to bring people to it and make it a success. So the fact is, we're looking for projects. Publishers are looking for projects every day. That's the reason they do it. So they have a sense of realism, certainly in terms of what's been done before and how strong the material is. But they're also optimistic because they know that you can be surprised at any point. And books that you think will be small turn out to be enormous, which is a lot of fun.
Mhm. And if people are not able to get a book deal, self-publishing can still be a great option as long.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
some of the biggest books that we published were self-published. I mean, 50 Shades of Grey, which sold 50 million, the first book sold 50 million copies, was self-published.
Yeah. Yep, that's a great point. And so if a book does well enough, then it can get attention from
Oh,
books.
yeah. No, the bigger houses watch that when they see a book taking off from a small press, they're on it. Somebody in-house is on it, probably several people. It's almost like the minor league. So if you can sign up a book that way or sign up the author for their next book, I mean, what a great way to discover a new talent.
Mm-hmm. So, all super great advice. This has been such an amazing interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What is your best advice for telling stories that stick with people?
Oh, it's such a great. We at the seminar, we gave a seminar in Tuscany a week ago, a week-long seminar, or a series of seminars actually over the course of a week. And one of those seminars, the first one actually, it was about openings of books. So it's about stories, but how to open the book in a compelling way because there's so much competition, because often you need to rope the reader in from the very beginning. And it starts with a story. And you'll see, looking at, we looked at a number of best-selling books by authors who were publishing for the first time. So they had to be authors who weren't celebrities and weren't, best-selling authors who were writing the next book. And inevitably, it opens with a story, and sometimes it's a story about the author. Atomic Habits, which has been phenomenally successful, like 25 million copies since it came out in whatever 2018. He opens with a story about himself, all about habits, how to make them and break them, and so forth, and sort of the laws of habit making. But it starts with him because he's not a psychologist. He's not an academic. He's an authority on the topic per se. So he needs to explain who he is and how he became so obsessed and such an expert in the topic of habits. So good stories, they always have a purpose. It really helpful to open, with a good story, and we had lots of examples of books that had that, and particularly in memoirs. They often start off with something pretty compelling.
Mhm.
But the stories that take us inside, a character, um, even with nonfiction, if they're describing, the author, then taking us inside their life in a compelling way, in an interesting way. Um, I mean, that's what you're looking for. Glass Castle, famous memoir. It opens with the author driving down the street in New York City and seeing her mother go through a dumpster. And
Ah.
it's just like a couple of pages of basically where she came from, and then suddenly and then she has another opening. Then the first chapter, is something about like I was almost burned to death, or it opens something like that. And when I was 3, it's just she recognized she needed to pull the reader right in and did a great job of doing that.
Mhm. Yes. So I think writing the beginning of a book is super difficult. I always do it last. So if you're crafting your story and you're not sure where to start, I would say skip the beginning and go deeper and then come back.
Yeah.
That always helps me. And then yeah, reading other books to see what other people are doing. Like the more you read, the more you're going to learn. And so picking up different genres, whether it's business, memoir, whatever, see what other people are doing for stories and
Yeah.
emulate. There's like the book Steal Like an Artist where you're borrowing a strategy from someone and your execution is going to be unrecognizable from your inspiration. So
Yeah.
not being afraid to draw inspiration from different sources.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. Roger, where can people learn more about you and stay connected?
Oh, I can be reached, at Kevin Anderson's Associates. I think it's just Roger at writing.com. Or you look up the books that I published. I have a website, it's just rogerscholl.com. You see the books that I've worked on over the years, and what I've done and so forth. So those two ways are good ones to use.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Again, we've been talking with Roger Scholl, senior editor, book consultant, and fellow ghostwriter. Thank you so much, Roger.
Thank you, Amelia. Terrific. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Stories That Stick. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.